Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
The things that we need to do to prevent the transmission of variants is the exact same thing we do to prevent COVID-19.
With more positive variant cases in BC, the message from health officials on stopping the spread. Also,
so there is no way of getting natural air in or ventilating the bad air out at this point.
why are windows at an Abbotsford elementary school being bolted shut? And
so as soon as they joined, they immediately started calling us the N-word.
If you're going to be a racist,
a Coquitlam teen is speaking out after being bombarded with racial slurs on a social media platform.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening. Anita is off tonight. Health officials are reporting 6 more deaths from COVID-19 in our province and more than 500 new cases, many of them in Abbotsford and the Tri-Cities. And there is concern tonight about more variant cases turning up. Our Tina Lovegreen is here live now. And Tina, what are we seeing when it comes to these new variants?
Well, Mike, we now have a total of 72 cases of those variants of concern, 52 of the UK variant and 20 of the South African. And this is a jump from last week. And why it's so concerning, of course, is because these variants are more efficient at transmission. Public health officials say a higher portion of contacts are likely to get sick. They say about 40 to 50% more likely to get COVID-19 through these variants. But the way to slow down transmission is still the same. Here's Deputy Provincial Health Officer Dr. Rekha Gustafson.
There is actually no indication from the behavior of the variants that we need to do anything that is different. And what we mean by that is that the mode of transmission of the new variants is very similar to other variants. The virus is just more efficient at transmission. What that means is that the things that we need to do to prevent the transmission of variants is the exact same thing we do to prevent COVID-19, but we have less room for error.
So she says what this means is that it's time to recommit to those measures we're all so familiar with.
Okay, Tina, so where are we when it comes to vaccinations and particularly the second dose?
Yeah, a bit of a highlight there. Yesterday, BC administered the highest number of vaccines in a single day. 12,250 people were vaccinated, and the number of people who received their second dose has also gone up. Health Minister Adrian Dix said the only thing that's holding back the province's immunization campaign is supply at this point. There's also some new preliminary data from the BC Centre of Disease Control that shows a single dose of the COVID-19 vaccine reduces the risk of infection among long-term care residents and healthcare workers by 80% within 2 to 3 weeks of receiving the shot. So that sparked the question of, well, given the shortage in supply, should BC focus on getting out that first dose, getting out as many first doses as possible?
So I would say that the data are being looked at very, very carefully, and evidence is accumulating to support that as a potential approach for maximizing protection in the population.
So that is something that is being looked at, but for now, BC is going to continue to provide those second doses when possible.
All right, Tina, thanks very much for the update. Tina Lovegreen. Well, the quarantine deadline is looming for travelers heading to Canada. Starting Sunday night, visitors arriving in Vancouver on non-essential travel and any Canadians returning home from non-essential trips are going to have to quarantine for 3 days in a government-approved hotel. Our Dan Burrett joins us now live with more on the tests and the accommodations. Dan?
Mike, people at YVR after 9 p.m. Sunday are going to see something very different. Take a look at this. This is where travelers will be tested for COVID-19 before beginning a mandatory supervised 3-day quarantine. YVR is one of only 4 airports across the country where people can arrive from overseas. Non-essential travelers will have to isolate for up to 72 hours in a designated hotel on their own dime while awaiting their test results. That's on top of the mandatory 2-week quarantine they already have to do. At least one traveler we spoke with today cut his trip short to avoid those new rules.
I'm supposed to come on March 5th, but to avoid this, the burden, I shortened my trip. My parents are sick in Korea, so even though there are so many barriers to travel, but I had to visit to see them before they, die.
Okay, Dan. So as of Sunday night, What hotels are people going to have to quarantine at when they land at YVR?
Well, thankfully, they have three options so far. The Westin Wall Centre and the Radisson Vancouver Airport hotels are short drives from the terminal in Richmond. Well, people can also try to book at a room at the Fairmont Vancouver Airport Hotel, which is at YVR. Outside of Vancouver, travelers are limited to arriving at airports in Calgary, Toronto, and Montreal. Travelers must book a mandatory hotel stay ahead of time over the phone, but only just a few days ahead of time. And they will need patience.
We are currently experiencing high call volumes with wait times up to 3 hours. In order to assist in reducing wait times and to better serve you, we request where possible that you delay booking your government-approved accommodation unless you are scheduled to arrive back to Canada within the next 48 hours.
As for the cost, it's not yet clear how much travelers will have to pay for those 3-day stays, but bookings elsewhere in Canada, at least for now, are far less than the $2,000 Ottawa first quoted. Mike.
All right, all starts on Sunday night. Dan Burrett with us live tonight. Thanks. Well, teachers at an Abbotsford elementary school say they don't feel safe after classroom windows were bolted shut. Late last year, they learned they'd been working in an environment without HVAC in a pandemic. As Yvette Brend reports, that's left the aging school without proper ventilation.
Back in December, teachers at Godson Elementary School learned that a wing of their school had no ventilation system installed. It was a surprise to many to learn that they'd been working in uncirculated air throughout the pandemic. So teachers started opening windows wide and urging students to come to class in warm clothing. But those measures didn't last long.
The district decided to secure the windows. They have bolted the windows, the top windows bolted shut completely, and the bottom windows had blocks of wood installed to prevent the windows from being opened more than just a couple of inches.
In January, the Abbotsford School District sent in a team of contractors who screwed shut the windows for safety reasons.
The level of anxiety, general anxiety, I think rose considerably, and they felt, what else do I do now, was the question that I received a lot. If I can't open my windows, what do I do now?
The move to secure the windows here at Godson Elementary has the BC Teachers Federation outraged. It says this has increased anxiety amongst the teachers and potentially increased the risk of outbreaks of COVID-19. The district says independent testing confirmed there are no air quality issues at this school. But just days before those tests came in, health authorities ordered one primary division at the school to self-isolate. And one teacher who worked in the affected wing has now tested positive for COVID-19. The province says they've budgeted $10 million to upgrade HVAC systems this year.
I just want to make sure that our teachers feel safe, that we have done everything we can to mitigate the spread of COVID-19, and that the air exchange and ventilation in these rooms, I think, needs to be addressed urgently before we end up with more variants or more isolations and more exposures.
But the BC Teachers Federation says Godson is just one example of poor HVAC systems in schools across the province.
Teachers are heavily reliant on opening windows. Like it's sad, and so then to come in, to your classroom and see that you can't open your window as wide as you used to be able to with no explanation, that's a huge problem that goes far beyond ventilation as well.
Terry Mooring says this needs to change, especially as outbreaks tick up again and COVID variants show up in schools. Yvette Brend, CBC News, Abbotsford.
Okay, so are you following the rules? A new poll suggests British Columbians are the worst in Canada at following COVID-19 rules all the time. And almost a quarter plan on breaking the rules over the upcoming spring break.
It's kind of akin to being on a diet and then having chocolate cake on the weekends. If you're a part of the 36% in Canada that are following nearly all the restrictions and rules nearly all the time, it leaves significant room for error. And
Pollsters reached out to 1,600 Canadians in early February and found only 48% say they're following COVID-19 restrictions and guidelines all the time. But here in BC, that number drops to 34%. The Insights West results showed also about 23% of Canadians are considering a trip outside their home community this spring break. A Coquitlam teenager is speaking out tonight after she was bombarded with racial slurs on a social media platform that hosts video chats. Police aren't pursuing any charges against the students who used the slurs. As Eva Yugwen-Senge reports, the victim wants to see more action from schools to prevent cyberbullying.
If you have pronouns in your bio, kill yourself.
A 15-year-old Surrey student says she was on a video call with friends on February 14th when the call was interrupted by at least 2 boys.
As soon as they joined, they immediately started calling us the N-word, and it was like repetitive, so no one could really get a word in, and it was almost like we were ambushed.
The youths were using a social media app called House Party, which allows multiple people to video chat at once. The girl says she was taken aback, but chose to react calmly.
Do you know the origin of where that comes from?
To help them out, not necessarily to call them out, because if I did that, they would go into defense mode, and it wouldn't be a conversation. It would be a yelling match.
She recorded the call and posted it to social media. That got the attention of the Coquitlam School District, where the bullies are students. Police ultimately decided not to recommend criminal charges against the kids. In a statement, RCMP said, "It is our understanding that each of the young people, all of them 13 years old, were not previously known to police. They were subject to consequences administered by their parents. Each of the youths were very remorseful for their actions."
I don't think they're remorseful because they felt like they did something wrong. They're remorseful because it's all over social media. And I felt almost hopeless because I felt like I've been through these situations before, and I felt like nothing would have happened because there's nothing in the school code of conduct to expel someone for being racist. So automatically like that, I felt like the system is completely against kids like me.
An expert on cyberbullying says the incident is a perfect example of how social media, bullying, and racism all intersect.
There's lots of research that says none of those school anti-bullying programs work. Suspension and expulsion is just not effective because you're not getting the kids to engage in a process of a thought process that helps them understand.
Despite what she endured, the victim has compassion for the youths that attacked her.
Honestly, no one is like that in person. It's because that you don't have to show your face, that when you feel like you're miserable, you feel the need to make other people miserable. That's how some people cope with it.
Her answer, she wants schools to give students cultural sensitivity training and to not be afraid to talk more openly about incidents like the one she went through. Eva Yugwen-Senge, CBC News, Vancouver.
Myanmar pro-democracy supporters demonstrated in front of the Chinese embassy in Vancouver today. The group rallied to call attention to China's continued support of the military junta that has assumed power in Myanmar. On February 1st, the military overthrew and detained the democratically elected leader Aung San Suu Kyi. Canada, along with the UK, has since imposed sanctions on Myanmar's ruling generals for overthrowing the civilian-led government. The protesters here say more needs to be done. Well, a big part of Vancouver's future plans involve fewer people driving and more people walking, cycling, and taking transit. But high bike theft rates remain a barrier for many would-be riders. As Joel Ballard with CBC Vancouver's Impact Unit reports tonight, cycling advocates are calling for more secure bicycle parking options in the city.
Over the years, Vancouver has positioned itself as a cycling city, but with increased cycling comes increased theft.
Often this is one of the reasons why people are not cycling as often, because they're worried that their bike won't be secure at their destination.
Vancouver continues to have the highest rate of bicycle theft per capita out of any major city in Canada. And advocates say one way to reduce it is to provide safer options for people to park their bicycles.
Ensuring that there are better, safe, secure end-of-trip facilities is key to get more people out on bikes.
Now, these facilities aren't your basic metal cages. They're secured parkades, and they can include everything from showers to lockers to even bicycle repair stations.
And these facilities are often offered both through the private and public sector.
All new buildings require bike parking. And it kind of really varies depending on the type of building.
But Sheena says the city should also be investing in its own end-of-trip infrastructure. Right now, the city has built no long-term parkades with end-of-trip facilities. Instead, it relies on TransLink, which has 11 bicycle parkades at different stations. But they offer only the basics, 4 walls and some bicycle stands.
If we were to look at the cities that are really leading by example, we are nowhere close.
Think of cycling cities in countries like the Netherlands and Japan. They offer large, safe, and sometimes incredibly sophisticated options. Even here in Canada, Toronto offers 4 long-term parkades.
It was focused on the need for commuters to have a safe place to lock their bike and to facilitate, comfortable bicycle commuting.
2 of them have showers, lockers, and even towel service. And they've been a hit with riders looking for safe options.
The secure parking is focused on security, of having the confidence that where you put your bike in the morning or in the evening, that it stays there.
Yet despite the theft and a goal to shift towards walking, cycling, and transit, the city of Vancouver says it's not on the to-do list.
We've had discussions with various kind of big building owners over the years and have gone as far as feasibility studies, but we haven't had anything really big land on the ground yet.
Leaving the humble street rack as some riders' only option. Joel Ballard, CBC News, Vancouver.
Well, a Nanaimo woman is devastated tonight after she says 28 of her prized showgirl chickens were killed by a neighbor's loose dog Monday. Maureen Ward says a giant schnauzer got into her hobby farm and attacked her exotic chickens, killing 28 of them. The chickens were pets with head-turning hairdos and names like Dolly, Elvis, and Cher.
The next day I went out and actually cleaned the snow because it was too devastating to come outside and see it. They weren't just livestock, they were pets as well.
Ward says she called RCMP and Animal Control, who captured the dog. The Regional District of Nanaimo issued the owner $450 in fines, and the animal will now have a dangerous dog designation. The Nanaimo woman is urging people to keep their dogs under control. Okay, Johanna is away tonight. Colette Kennedy is joining us now with the forecast.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, we're going to have a soggy weekend ahead. Don't you just love it when it times out like this? It comes in for the weekend, but that's how it goes here. We're looking at a rainfall warning for the north and for the central coast. 120 to 150 millimeters of rainfall is going to be possible, and it's not just one system, it's really 2. And the one into Sunday is going to be very moisture laden in terms of what we're seeing. So just kind of this train, we're under the influence of a broad trough right now. We have the scattered precipitation that we're looking at. Then we're going to be seeing this moving in tomorrow in the morning, starting along the north coast and then pushing down towards the south coast by the second half of the day, and then yet another coming in for Sunday. We've got more of a zonal flow to the jet stream, so that's allowing this to push in. As I move this forward in time, your best bet, if you do want to get outdoors and not get wet, was probably going to be tomorrow morning, or at least the early part of the day. The clouds will move in, some light precipitation. It gets much more significant, though, as we go into the afternoon hours and evening, especially later afternoon, evening, overnight, and then that next wave is going to be coming in into Sunday. When I come back, we'll take a closer look at the kind of rainfall amounts we're going to be looking at for the lower mainland and when this is all going to end as well, Mike.
All right, Colette, thanks. We'll talk to you again in a bit. Thank you. And a reminder, you can also watch this newscast live on CBC Gem. CBC Vancouver is also on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. Well, as more and more Canadians are vaccinated against COVID-19, troubling news that the variants continue to get a toehold in our country. Why health officials fear a third wave, coming up. And at 6:18, thanks for staying with us during our commercial-free live stream tonight. Well, a lot of us keep track of how many steps we take in a day, but one Halifax man is taking things to a whole new level. He's just reached the 25 million step mark, and he's still counting. As Colleen Jones tells us, walking has been a big part of his recovery.
It was dire days and slow progress after a massive stroke 6 years ago left Raymond Bourque relearning everything. He felt lucky to be alive, of course, but he never knew learning how to walk would be this difficult.
It just happened, and all of a sudden, normal guy is in a shower on a Sunday afternoon in July getting ready for supper, and a blood vessel explodes in his head. And it knocked out the left side of my body because the stroke was on the right side.
You would never know looking at him now about the discipline he needed to get to this stage, and that's where his Fitbit came in. He started like everyone, tracking his steps, walking every day no matter the weather. He started tracking all this back in 2015. His Fitbit odometer, if you will, just turned the 25 million step mark.
I'm self-driven. I played sports all my life, and it just became another way of coming to bat in the ninth inning. Trying to see if you could do what you had to do when you really, really needed to.
Now he's motivated for more. 30 million steps by the end of this year, eventually 50 million. But for the record, already 25 million steps calculates out to almost 19,000 kilometers of walking. He's gone through 3 Fitbits, 6 pairs of sneakers a year, and most importantly, he's healthy.
I'm doing really well. My blood pressure is low. I've been told like a teenager, but...
Look, another hill.
Gee, surprise, surprise.
At 62, the stroke 6 years ago was a wake-up call to do more for his health by walking regularly and, of course, managing his stress. It has changed his whole outlook.
Trying to worry more about the things that matter and not to sweat the small stuff.
And keep walking.
Possible. And keep walking. Boy, head down, keep walking.
There's that old song, I will walk 500 miles and I will walk 500 more. Well, with Raymond Bourque, he's done that now over and over again. Colleen Jones, CBC News, Halifax.
Let's keep on walking. Good program for sure. Okay, back in just a few seconds, we have more news on the COVID-19 variants and how the province of Ontario is relaxing some of its public health restrictions, but not in the hardest hit areas, and that includes Toronto. We'll have that and more coming up. Until then, just enjoy this view of soggy downtown Vancouver looking north up Cambie Street tonight. COVID-19 case numbers are dropping across the country, but variants of the virus are spreading. And federal modeling now suggests that could lead to a third wave of infection. As Catherine Cullen explains tonight, health officials are urging provinces not to ease restrictions too soon.
The rate of increase has slowed over the past several weeks.
There's good news.
Almost 60% fewer active cases than a month ago.
And potential bad news. Modeling showing COVID variants could send cases shooting up, even if current health measures are maintained.
Further lifting of the public health measures will cause the epidemic to resurge rapidly and strongly.
Officials say this isn't about precise numbers, more of a general warning about what could happen if jurisdictions ease up on restrictions.
I think they're all vigilant and know that if you ease anything at all, it better be slow with a lot of surveillance, testing.
Variants are real and they're already here.
The Prime Minister echoed the warning, saying Canadians have to stick to strong public health measures.
Otherwise, we could see a third wave that is even worse than the second or the first.
But at a news conference today, he wouldn't bite when asked if any of the provinces are opening up too soon.
The job of the federal government is to be there to support the provinces in the very difficult decisions they need to make.
There is potential relief on the way, but it is becoming a race between the vaccines and the variants. Catherine Cullen, CBC News, Ottawa.
And the province of Ontario is keeping some of its hard-hit regions in the strictest lockdown for longer. It is extending stay-at-home orders for 3 areas, including Toronto. As Ellen Morrow explains, some businesses say that's exactly what should happen.
From running his busy brunch chain to now dashing door to door, this is how Brian Jackson has survived the pandemic.
Thanks.
Thank you.
This year has been has a share of challenges. We definitely had to look outside of the box. Sorry, I know we don't get through this.
But as tough as it's been, Jackson is relieved Toronto isn't reopening for now, fearing it would have been just a matter of time before another lockdown.
This whole year, I mean, it's been an emotional roller coaster for us. Yes, we want to open. We want to open, but we want to open and we want to know that we're going to stay open.
Today, Ontario extended the stay-at-home order for Toronto, Peel, and North Bay Parry Sound for another 2 weeks at least. The province heeding local medical officers of health.
We're going to be super cautious.
That caution driven by variants of concern, definitely more contagious, potentially more deadly, and on the rise.
They're rising, by the way, under very strict measures and restrictions. This 2 weeks really puts us into hopefully a different context where the variants might still be better controlled or slowed.
And crucially, buy time for more Ontarians to be vaccinated. That can't happen soon enough, says Dr. Samir Gupta.
If we loosen up and we let up, it'll come back, and it'll come back in a way that it hasn't done before, much faster, much harder, and put us in a very dangerous position.
That struggle to control cases as so many businesses struggle to survive.
It's been so long that I forgot what it feels like to have people in here.
Boris Fong owns a pub in York Region, allowed to reopen on Monday.
As long as we do it properly and keep everyone safe, we'll be okay.
Meanwhile, Jackson is trying to stay hopeful for the future. It's all he can do.
The sooner we get to warmer weather and we can get open, get ready, and then get the summers again, I think we're going to have more success.
And a rare illness is being linked to cases of COVID-19. It generally appears in young patients after they've had the virus. Vicodopia has more on the illness and its impact.
After 4 days of fever, Jacob landed in the hospital with rashes, headache, and fatigue.
It went from like not moving, tired pain to excruciating pain.
The symptoms came a month after he tested positive for the coronavirus, but he had no symptoms then. Jacob was not alone.
Like when I was talking to the nurses, like I couldn't believe that there were actually like 4 other kids that in the time span that we were in the hospital that were going through it also. Like it wasn't, I know it's not common, but it's sadly not that uncommon.
Montreal Children's Hospital has seen 30 cases of multisystem inflammatory syndrome, or MIS-C, since October, with more severe cases in recent weeks.
Certainly, from a parent and physician's point of view, it's quite scary, but they all have recovered fully. And I have heard in Canada right now, there have been no deaths related to this illness.
MIS-C first turned up in mostly healthy children last May in the U.S. At the time, it was a mystery illness because young patients with it tested negative for the coronavirus. Doctors now think that's because MIS-C shows up weeks after an infection.
After the body has cleared this infection, a proportion of people who just happen to be made that way genetically have a hyper response, and they target organs in their own body.
Sick Kids Hospital in Toronto has seen at least 130 cases, most of them in the second wave. In the U.S., there's been a surge in MIS-C with 2,000 cases and 30 deaths. There are no national figures in Canada where the illness is still considered rare.
With the new variants, increased number of cases give us a higher denominator and a likelihood of having more MIS-C down the road. But again, we do not know the answer to this at this time, but are very vigilant to watching this.
As scary as it can be, most children with MIS-C, like Jacob, recover completely. Vicodopia, CBC News, Toronto.
Thousands of engine fires and failures, millions of cars and drivers at risk. And after many years and many recalls, the danger could still be out there. CBC's Marketplace and Go Public joined forces to investigate the Hyundai and Kia engine recalls. Rosa Marcatelli exposes the flaws in Canada's recall system.
An engine fire suddenly breaks out at the side of an Ontario highway.
I don't want to get too close because it is exploding.
Another one starts just minutes after the car is parked, caught on camera. That's Abby Sankar's Hyundai Elantra burning.
There it is, my car. It's still here.
We went along with him to see what's left of the car in a junkyard, a far cry from when he bought it new 7 years ago.
Just unbelievable to see this car in this situation.
Then there are the engines that suddenly die at high speeds, a lot of them.
I noticed that my foot is on the gas pedal, but I'm getting nothing.
The engine in Keisha Taylor's Hyundai Santa Fe failed on a highway.
This thing is coming fast to a halt, and I'm in the middle of the highway. Is this how my life ends?
Many of the potentially dangerous engines recalled have no fix besides an entire engine replacement. Instead, the car makers have installed sensors that are supposed to warn drivers of a pending engine failure or fire so they can get to a dealership. But some drivers, like Keisha, tell us that their sensors didn't warn them of anything when their engines died.
That is a very serious safety issue, absolutely.
George Eny is a consumer advocate with the Automobile Protection Association.
That would suggest then that we need to have I would say, a wary eye over this recall. The implications if the knock sensor system doesn't work are pretty staggering.
The car makers tell us their early warning sensors are independently tested and state-of-the-art, and that engines die for many reasons, not just a manufacturing defect. Little reassurance for Keisha, Abby, and other Hyundai and Kia owners who worry profits are coming before safety. Rosa Marcatelli, CBC News, Calgary.
And to find out what Transport Canada is doing to protect consumers and why vehicles with the same engines are still on Canadian roads, catch the full story tonight on Marketplace. That's this evening, 8 p.m. on CBC Television and streaming anytime on GEM. He is just 19 years old, half Indigenous, half Caucasian, and he's trying to figure out where he fits in the world. Coming up, we'll introduce you to Jeremy Ratt, who's hosting a new CBC podcast that's proving he's wise beyond his years.
The nighttime skyline of Vancouver changed forever last night with the squeeze of a trigger on a flare gun. They called it the light-up ceremony of the Lions Gate Bridge between Vancouver and the North Shore. From every angle, it looked spectacular. Premier Bill Bennett and Louise Guinness, a member of the family who had the bridge built in 1937, were the catalysts. It looked quite different back in 1937. The Guinness family of Irish stout fame had the bridge built to connect with the North Shore, where they owned a huge tract of land. The area became known as the British Properties. It took a year for the Lions Gate Bridge to arise and was ready for use by the fall of 1938. Tolls were charged, 2 bits apiece for cars for the next 25 years. During that time, the Guinness family sold the bridge to the province for $6 million. Last night's affair was a massive public relations job put on by the government. They chartered the ferry for the occasion, and hundreds of people were invited. They ate, drank, and enjoyed the sights and sounds of a harbor cruise on government expense. The Guinness family paid for the lights, $300,000 worth. There are actually 170 of them, 100-watt mercury vapor. It takes them a couple of minutes to come on, so it's not as if you pull a switch and they're suddenly there.
Enjoyed it very much indeed. Lovely evening. Great sight.
It's more fun going under it in the boat than it is driving over it every day.
I thought it was absolutely magnificent. Thank you, McGinnis's, and thank you, Grace McCarthy.
I'm sure it will be enjoyed by many people for many years.
And there was more. When it was time to disembark, a privileged few got to ride in vintage cars to West Vancouver. A reenactment of the first procession over the bridge more than 48 years ago. But the lights are the real story. So let's take one more look.
Some of the stories we're following tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
That the mode of transmission of the new variants is very similar to other variants. The virus is just more efficient at transmission.
The spread of variants a concern in BC tonight. The province has now confirmed 72 cases, 6 more deaths from COVID-19, 508 new cases are also being reported. BC hits a one-day record for vaccinations, though, with more than 12,200 people getting the shot.
They have bolted the windows, the top windows bolted shut completely, and the bottom windows had blocks of wood installed to prevent the windows from being opened more than just a couple of inches.
Teachers at an Abbotsford elementary school say they don't feel safe after school district officials screwed shut some classroom windows. Late last year, they learned they'd been working in an environment without HVAC in a pandemic. The aging school doesn't have proper ventilation throughout, and teachers are using windows to try to circulate the fresh air.
So as soon as they joined, they immediately started calling us the N-word, and it was like repetitive. So no one could really get a word in, and it was almost like we were ambushed.
A Coquitlam teenager is speaking out after she was bombarded with racial slurs on a social media platform that hosts video chats. Police aren't pursuing any charges against the students who used the slurs, but the victims want to see more action from schools to prevent cyberbullying. A new CBC podcast that launched this week stars a young man exploring the complexities of his Indigenous identity. 19-year-old Jeremy Ratt identifies as half Indigenous and half white. In his podcast, Pieces, Jeremy goes on a journey of self-discovery as he learns more about his Woods Cree heritage. He reflects on his memories growing up and converses with family members and mentors that allow him to gather strength in his Indigenous identity. And joining us now is Jeremy Ratt. Jeremy, thanks for doing this tonight. I want to ask you, first of all, what inspired Pieces, and tell us more about what it's all about.
Pieces is kind of my coming-of-age journey as I'm figuring myself out and figuring my identity out. I hopped a lot of towns growing up, and I was born under a single parent, a full Woods Cree mother and a Caucasian father, and as such, I spent a good chunk of my life not really knowing who I was or not really feeling like I belonged to either side of myself. And this podcast is at least a chapter of my journey as I go about trying to figure that out.
And you talk to a number of people in the podcast, your mother, your former acting teacher, Indigenous advocates. What are some of the things you learned from them?
I think the biggest takeaways revolve around the lessons that I learned from them through the stories that they've experienced. I find that a lot of the people I've talked to for the podcast will give their perspective as I give all of them the mutual question, I don't know who I am, can you please help me? And they'll all give their 2 cents, and some of the biggest discoveries I've come across have come from my mom and my acting teachers and advocates making confessions to me about there was a point where I also didn't know who I was, and here's what I have to say to you. So a lot of the conclusions I come to revolve around the fact that I need to learn more about how to validate myself as a human being.
And I guess then the process of making the podcast itself might help you come to better terms with your identity?
There's something about the format that feels a lot more confessional to me, and that really helps me as I have an experience in broadcasting, and I've always had an interest in audio entertainment and broadcasting, so I always wanted to tell my story in some capacity, but I never knew what the format was until the idea for Pieces finally came to me.
And who do you expect this is going to resonate with? I mean, for people who are also in the process of coming to terms with their identity, what do you want them to take away from listening to Pieces?
I think a lot of people need to understand that there's always going to be a newer, improved version of themselves out there waiting for them. There's always new discoveries to be made, no matter how old you are. And that's not to say that I want to throw people into some kind of dysphoria over their own identities, but the idea that you can constantly improve, that you can constantly feel more like yourself, as with this podcast, I'm starting to feel more like myself and feel validated in being myself.
All right, so what's next for the podcast?
Right now, as of this moment, it's just waiting for the reception and definitely figuring out how the other ways I can tell my story and figure out how that'll, what else will be up for me as well. And it's a chapter of my journey for sure, so more chapters might be to come.
Well, we look forward to those. Thanks so much for doing this, Jeremy. We appreciate it. And you can listen and subscribe to Pieces on CBC Listen, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or Spotify. It is starting to warm up in the Lone Star State, but for some politicians, the frigid chill they are feeling is the cold shoulders of their constituents. The fallout over the failings of the state next. And at 6:41 on this Friday evening, a live look at Revelstoke tonight. Lots of snow there. Our snow on the coast might be a distant memory at this point, but that's not the case in the rest of the province. Colette Kennedy back with a full weekend forecast just ahead.
This is our second year, so we are hosting the camp here on Mackenzie Island in partnership with the Rainbow Coalition of Yellowknife. We received a lot of interest from a lot of different organizations who work with youth that want to get them out on the land, so we decided to expand the camp this year to this site here where we offer our fall programming for post-secondary education.
Come on!
A lot of the kids are really eager to get out there and to see the way that the Yellowknife's Dene members traditionally would set the nets under the ice. A lot of them, it's their first time seeing a net being pulled under or being pulled out from under the ice.
Don't play around with it too much, okay? Be respectful to it, okay?
Is it heavy? Yeah. So it's really amazing to see the excitement that they have when they come out and to see how interested they are in learning what's happening inside of the fish as well. So we've created a couple different language diagrams to show them in the language what the names are of the fish, but also to show them the internal parts of the fish in the language.
Pull forward like that. And then I'm gonna pull out the guts, like that. Take out the gills, like that. Now I can eat it.
What did you think of today's experience?
I liked it, and you learned how that you have to like respect, not just fish that we learned, but like everything. If you respect the animal, you'll get respect back.
I quite enjoy this day. It's fun. I like look at the fish. It was educational, and I enjoy that. And I enjoy what I learned today. It's kind of my interest, really. Just fun seeing what a fish is. Just fun seeing what animals are. I liked about the fish, or how she made it.
Yeah? What did you like about it?
I liked about the parts of the fish.
What was your favorite?
The heart.
Okay, here's the stomach. I'm gonna open it up.
There's a really important aspect that our people, the Dene people, have when we handle fish or animals from the land. You have to have a relationship with those animals and to have a spiritual connection with them and to respect their life that they're giving to us so that we can eat their meat. And we have been expressing that with the children, that we have to have that respect with the animals and the fish in order for us to continue to use their livelihood for our livelihood. And it's really important that we continue to pass on that knowledge so that we can continue to use these lands and waters the way that we have for years and years.
Well, millions in Texas are reeling from the brutal winter storms this week. While the power grid has mostly been restored, Stephen D'Souza tells us many are still recovering from some of the coldest weather in decades.
After a long, frigid week in Texas, the temperature started to rise as winter-weary Texans lined up for precious bottled water. In Dallas, hundreds waited in their cars for supplies. Some had resorted to boiling snow.
We wore out lights for 3 days, water for 3 days. I hadn't ate in 2.5 days, and I was sick when I made it here.
Close to half the state's population remains under boil water advisories, which are expected to last through the weekend, as officials warn the impact of the storm will last for months.
For many families without means, this crisis will continue long past water pressure being restored and the lights being turned off.
Even as the weather clears, the tragic toll of the storm continues to mount. An 11-year-old boy was found dead in his family's trailer earlier this week. Officials suspect hypothermia. Today, the much-maligned Power Authority announced the electricity supply was back to normal capacity, though more than 100,000 households were still without power. The regulator again defended the decision to institute rolling blackouts as the storm hit.
Those decisions prevented much, much worse blackouts.
Critics say the real problem was a failure to winterize the power grid, a recommendation made after a 2011 storm.
The warnings have been there for years, and this was a train wreck on the way to happening 10 years ago.
Now, yet another kick for already struggling Texans. For those with variable rates, the high electricity demand is sending bills soaring, thousands of dollars for some.
Like, okay, do I feed my family or do I run the heat? Which one do I do?
Just one of the many questions Texans are asking as the state continues to wrestle with the aftermath of the storm. Stephen D'Souza, CBC News, New York.
Okay, the weekend is here. Johanna is away tonight, so Colette Kennedy joins us with the forecast.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, it has been just such a difficult stretch. 5 nights in a row where that temperature has been below freezing. And for tonight, even though things, yes, have been improving, they're looking at a hard freeze warning. All the areas that you see here in the somewhat lighter purple, that's a freeze warning farther south. And just to put that in perspective, what does that mean? A hard freeze, in generally, it's about -2 to -3. And with that, you do get wide destructions of plants. But really important that if you don't have heat, not good for people either. But, you know, I said it's getting a little better. It's kind of day by day, sort of baby steps here. So that polar vortex beginning to retreat, much more significant by the end of the weekend and really into the beginning of next week. Look at how the coloration changes down here with our contours into Texas. So they're talking about being closer to seasonal, which is upper teens, low 20s as they get back into the beginning of next week. Kind of this zonal pattern to the jet stream, really important for the weather for British Columbia here too, because we're talking about these systems kind of coming in one after another, riding in, and yet another for Saturday, but the one Sunday is really going to be the moisture-laden one. So it is what's going to make it such a soggy weekend. So we see that coming down the north and central coast. That's why that's 120, 150 millimeters of rain through there. Now for tomorrow morning, we may get some nice breaks before this kind of all comes in. So I would take advantage of that if you can, and then it's into the afternoon and evening. We'll see the rain coming in, and then another surge comes in and down the coastline as we go into Sunday. And look at this, in terms of the amount of rain at times, it is going to be quite heavy. It goes all the way into Monday, and then we see it kind of tapering off. In terms of the amounts, I'm just showing you a few areas, you know, It's quite possible we're going to be in that 20 to 50 range. I don't think it's going to be near 20. I think it's going to be closer to 50 millimeters and even above. In fact, and you can see for Tofino over 60 millimeters, but look at the gray colors here, the contours and what that corresponds with on our legend there, over 100 millimeters of rain. So really significant with these two systems coming on through. A look at what you can expect tomorrow for Whistler, 2 degrees, 6 degrees, Port Hardy and Prince Rupert with that rain, and you may still have some sun into Kamloops. You know, the other thing to take note of here is this second system for the second half of the weekend is much warmer too. So we're going to see that freeze level probably around the 800 to 1,000 meters as that comes in. A look at what you could expect in terms of, I know you want to get through this and get past it. Well, all right, we're going to have to accept it for the weekend. Some windy conditions, by the way, on Sunday as well. But going into Monday, I know I have rain in here, but actually I think as we get to the second half of that day, we may actually begin to see some breaks developing here, and that's a really nice setup for Tuesday. When you're talking about 5 days with wet conditions, boy, oh boy, I'd like to see how everyone's going to take advantage of that day, Mike.
We'll look forward to it. Thanks, Colette. Well, a unique outdoor education program in Labrador is giving some Indigenous students an opportunity to connect with part of their heritage. One of the classes is tailor-made for winter and teaches traditional hunting and survival skills. Have a look.
We're going out and the kids are going to look for rabbit runs and they're going to set up their own snares. The majority of the kids had never set a rabbit snare, for example, in their lives. As soon as you do it before.
I think these are the feet. Like two of them, see them?
Okay. Miss, I don't know how to tie it on.
You can do it, just wrap it around. The course is designed to bring the Innu culture into the school and to take the school, the students, out onto the land. They learn a lot about cultural identity, you know, like what makes them Innu. And it also brings in community members to help the students and teach the students knowledge from, you know, their own culture.
You put the boughs around it so you get the rabbit to go where you want it to go.
You good with where you gotten? So in the 2-week run, you're usually guaranteed at least one rabbit.
I didn't want to hold it. I passed it to the teacher or my friends. I was freaking out because they said it was like moving. So I looked at it and I thought it was moving, but it was actually me shaking. So I passed it to my friends. It freaked me out. I don't want to, like, it's fun snaring, but holding that rabbit is scary.
Why do I do this? That's right.
After the snaring, we're gonna go back to class and we're gonna have to set up a tent, set up a pot, and we're gonna have to like clean it and cook the rabbit, we're gonna have someone come in. I'm kind of terrified, actually. It's gonna be gross, really gross.
Well, I hope that they understand that their culture is still very much alive and that they can take what they're learning and they can learn further. To see them when they watch you do it and then they set their own and actually catch rabbits, oh, the excitement in them is amazing. It's something that you can't even describe. You can't. It's just, you'd had to be there.
Well, they took 1 year off from their royal duties, but Harry and Meghan are in no rush to return to the royal fold. Why they're sticking to their independent plan next.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Ibunwa and I live in Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island. So I was born and raised in Lagos, Nigeria, which is in the southwest of Nigeria. All my friends growing up in school, we were from different parts of the country, and so we had a sense that we were Nigerian, in addition to all our indigenous individual backgrounds and ethnic groups. But in honesty, I would say that what it means to be Nigerian is not yet clear. It's not clear to the people, it's not clear to the government. The sense of disenfranchisement that a lot of people still feel many, many years after the Civil War has ended. It's over 50 years now. And yet many people feel overlooked or marginalized in terms of politics, but also it's very difficult for them to go to another part of the country and live their lives and run their businesses without facing serious roadblocks. Growing up, my siblings and I generally had the sense that, and this is just our parents, their emphasis has always been on education. And I moved to PEI for school in 2014. My experience with PEI has been overwhelmingly positive. That's the one thing I will always say. My first Christmas away from home, I had just met a friend, and I think I just mentioned in passing, oh, this is my first Christmas away from home. And she and her family invited me over for Christmas. People are kind and are warm, and everybody calls you dear. The summers are absolutely magical, and it's a great place to be. PEI over the last few years has branded itself as the province that wants immigrants and wants people from all over the world to come and make this place their home. And I think it's very important that we share more about our history and just to give people who are meeting us perspective. If we're going to be embracing people from all over the world, we have to be conscious and very, very intentional about making everybody feel as though, yes, we may not agree on everything, and yes, our values and our cultures may be worlds apart, but I will always respect your dignity as a human being, and just sharing the space, it makes a world of difference, I would say.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
On March 8th, join Michelle Elliott and SFU Public Square in a conversation on COVID, motherhood, and paid and unpaid work. Learn more at sfu.ca/public square. And Pieces, CBCBC's new original podcast, is now available. Go on a journey with host Jeremy Ratt as he grapples with his Indigenous identity and understands his past. Learn more at cbc.ca/pieces.
Well, it's official. Prince Harry and Meghan are out of the family business. And while that seems to be what they wanted, as Renee Filipponi reports, some say the way it played out may have even surprised them.
For one of his last official engagements, Prince Harry dressed in uniform. He's known to have cherished his military titles. The couple held a number of royal patronages given to them by the Queen, all now stripped away. Buckingham Palace says the couple couldn't continue with the responsibilities and duties that come with a life of public service, but they remain much-loved members of the family.
To the outsider, this may seem harsh, but the message really out of Buckingham Palace is very clear. You are either in the royal family or you're out.
The Duke and Duchess of Sussex stepped down last year, breaking from the royal family and moving to the U.S. The door was left open for them to return. But they signed lucrative deals with Netflix and Spotify in their desire to find financial independence, and it cost them. Those close to Harry and Meghan say this wasn't how they wanted things to end.
I know that he'll be personally gutted, just as I was, that he was not allowed to pull a military uniform on anymore. But regardless, that doesn't change his commitment to the individuals that serve in it and those that require care beyond it.
The couple say even without an official role, we can all live a life of service. Service is universal. The Sussexes already made headlines twice this week, first announcing they are expecting their second child, And then news they would sit down for an exclusive interview with Oprah Winfrey. Royal commentators say that may have sped up today's decision.
And there is a lot going on in the world. There's a lot going on within the royal family. Don't forget the Duke of Edinburgh is still currently in hospital at the moment. So I think if they could draw a line beneath all of this speculation, that was the preferable option.
Marking the end of their service to the crown and the next step in their search for freedom from the firm. Renee Filipponi, CBC News, London.
That's all the time we have tonight. Just a reminder, you can also watch our newscasts online anytime at cbc.ca/BC. Our next local news right here at 11 o'clock. Dan Burrett is here after the National. Thanks for watching tonight. Have a great weekend.